The notification chimed on my phone as I sat in the cramped break room of the Legal Aid Society, eating a wilted salad from a plastic container. Congratulations, Emily! We're thrilled to offer you the position of Senior Staff Attorney specializing in tenant rights and small business protection. I read it twice, my heart racing. After 3 years of grinding through case after case, fighting for people who couldn't afford justice, I'd finally earned the promotion I'd been working toward. I should have called Lucas first. My best friend would have screamed with excitement and probably ordered champagne to my office. I should have texted Aunt Rosa, who'd been my biggest cheerleader since law school. Instead, muscle memory made me dial my mother's number. "Vivian Reyes," she answered crisply, the sound of keyboards clicking in the background of her corner office. "Mom, I got the promotion. Senior staff attorney. They're giving me my own team and—" "Hold on, mija." The clicking stopped. "Did you say legal aid? Still?" The enthusiasm drained from my voice. "Yes, still legal aid. This is what I've been working toward." A pause that lasted too long. "Emily, when are you going to get serious about your career? You have a law degree from Georgetown. You could be making partner at a real firm by now, not playing social worker with people who can't even pay their rent." "These people need advocates, Mom. They're being pushed out of their homes by developers who are creating jobs and improving neighborhoods. You're fighting progress, mija. Fighting the very people who could offer you a real future." I closed my eyes, feeling 15 again. This is a real future. I'm helping families stay in their homes, protecting small businesses from smart business practices. Emily, you're 28 years old. Do you know what I'd built by 28? Of course I knew. Vivian Reyes had arrived in this country with nothing, worked 3 jobs while pregnant with my sister Sophia, and somehow managed to scrape together enough money to start importing textiles from Guatemala. By 28, she'd secured her first major contract with a department store chain. By 30, she owned a warehouse. By 35, she was worth more than I'd probably ever see in my lifetime. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if the story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I nodded. They're still in their home because of you. Mrs. Chen's restaurant is still open because you fought that predatory loan modification. The community garden in Shaw exists because you proved the city couldn't just seize that lot without proper compensation. Real change, Emily. Real lives. But Mom's not wrong about the money. I'm barely making rent on my studio apartment while she's closing million-dollar deals. Your mom measures worth in dollars. That doesn't mean you have to. Lucas was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it were different things. I'd spent my childhood watching Vivian command rooms, close deals, and build an empire through sheer force of will. My father, Miguel, had been different. Gentle, thoughtful, always encouraging me to follow my heart rather than my bank account. But he died when I was 16, leaving me alone with my mother's relentless pragmatism and my sister Sophia's desperate attempts to earn approval by following exactly in Vivian's footsteps. "There's something else," Lucas said carefully. "The news I mentioned? My firm is representing a group of former employees in a class action suit against Reyes Import Corporation." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Against my mother's company? Wrongful termination, wage theft, unsafe working conditions. Apparently, she's been cutting corners for years. The lead plaintiff is this guy Daniel Wu, former senior manager who got fired after he reported safety violations to OSHA. "You're suing my mother?" "I'm representing workers who were exploited by their employer. I didn't know it was your mother's company when I took the case, Emily, but now that I do..." He paused. "This could be big, really big, the kind of case that could shut down her entire operation." I felt sick. How big? 50 million in damages, maybe more. The call came 3 weeks later, at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. I was in my pajamas, reviewing depositions for a housing discrimination case, when my phone rang with my mother's contact. Emily. Her voice was different, smaller, somehow, though she was clearly trying to maintain her usual commanding tone. "It's 11 o'clock, Mom. Tomorrow, lunch. It's important. I'm in court tomorrow afternoon. This is about my business, about what's happening with the lawsuit." So she knew I knew. "Mom, 12:30, Morton's, downtown. I'll send a car." The line went dead before I could object. I stared at my phone, then at the stack of case files on my coffee table. My studio apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. I thought about calling Lucas, but what would I say? That my mother, the woman who'd spent my entire life telling me I wasn't good enough, was reaching out when she finally needed something? The next morning, I dressed carefully. Conservative navy suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in the severe bun I wore to court. Armor for whatever was coming. Morton's was exactly the kind of place my mother loved. Expensive, exclusive. The sort of restaurant where deals were made over $30 steaks. She was already seated when I arrived, checking her phone with manicured fingers. At 55, Vivian Reyes was still striking. Silver threading through her black hair, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, and the kind of posture that commanded attention even while sitting down. "You look tired," she said, as I sat across from her. "Hello to you too, Mom." She set down her phone and studied me with the intensity she usually reserved for quarterly reports. "You know about the lawsuit." "I know about it." "What do you know?" "Enough." She nodded slowly. "The allegations are serious. My lawyers tell me it could go very badly if we don't handle it correctly." "Are the allegations true?" Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that I'd ask so directly. "Business is complicated, Emily. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices to survive." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get." The waiter appeared to take our orders. My mother requested the salmon. I ordered a salad I knew I wouldn't be able to eat. When we were alone again, she leaned forward. "I need your help." The words hung between us like a challenge. In my entire life, I couldn't remember my mother ever asking for my help with anything. She'd criticized, commanded, and dismissed, but never asked. My help with what? "The lawsuit. My legal team is—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "They're good with corporate law, mergers, acquisitions, but this is different. This is about workers' rights, labor law, the kind of advocacy work you do. The kind of work you've spent years telling me is worthless." "I never said worthless. You said useless. You said I was wasting my potential." She had the grace to look away. "I may have been harsh." "Harsh," I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You told me I was fighting the wrong side, that I should be working for the developers and the corporations instead of against them. And maybe I was wrong about that. The admission seemed to cost her something. Maybe having someone on my team who understands the other side would be valuable. You want me to switch sides, abandon everything I believe in to save your company? I want you to use your skills to help your family." Family. I set down my water glass harder than necessary. "When was the last time you treated me like family, Mom? When was the last time you supported anything I cared about? When you were 16 and your father died, who paid for Georgetown? Who made sure you had everything you needed? Writing checks isn't the same as caring. It's caring in the only way that matters. Money is how you protect the people you love. It's how you build something that lasts." Our food arrived, creating a brief respite from the tension. I picked at my salad while my mother cut her salmon with surgical precision. When we were alone again, she leaned forward. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Join my legal team, Help us develop a defense strategy that accounts for the worker's perspective. You understand how they think, what they want. I understand how they think because I believe they're right. Then help me find a solution that works for everyone. There is no solution that works for everyone. Either you exploited your workers or you didn't. Either you broke labor laws or you didn't. The world isn't that simple, Emily. Some things are. She set down her fork and looked at me directly. If I lose this lawsuit, I lose everything. The company, the warehouses, the house, everything your father and I built. If you lose, it's because you deserve to lose. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't take them back. My mother's face went very still. Is that what you think? That I deserve to be destroyed? I think you deserve to face consequences for your actions. Even if those consequences hurt Sophia too, she works for the company, Emily. This is her livelihood. Takeout containers spread across my coffee table like evidence files. I told him everything about lunch with my mother, every manipulation and guilt trip and veiled threat. She's desperate, Lucas said, twirling lo mein around his chopsticks. I've seen it before with defendants in big cases. They start reaching out to anyone who might help, even people they've burned. But what if she's right about Sophia? What if I'm punishing my sister for my mother's mistakes? Sophia's an adult who chose to work for a company that exploits workers. She's not some innocent victim. I wanted to agree, but Sophia was still my little sister. The one who'd cried when our father died, who'd looked to me for comfort when our mother became even more distant and demanding. Sophia had chosen to seek our mother's approval through compliance rather than rebellion. But that didn't make her complicit in every corporate decision. What do you know about Daniel Wu? I asked. Lucas pulled out his phone and scrolled through notes. 42, married, 2 kids. Worked for your mom's company for 15 years, started in the warehouse and worked his way up to senior operations manager. Clean record, good employee evaluations until the end. What kind of safety violations did he report? Chemical exposure in Warehouse C. Apparently, they were storing cleaning solvents and textile dyes in the same space without proper ventilation. Workers were getting sick, headaches, respiratory issues, skin irritation. And my mother's response? Officially, they claimed the warehouse met all safety standards. Unofficially, 3 days later, Wu was fired for performance issues that had never been documented before. I felt sick. How many workers were affected? 17 people worked that warehouse. Wu documented everything. Photos, air quality readings he took himself, medical records from workers who sought treatment. He tried to handle it internally first, went to his supervisors, then to HR. When nothing happened, he filed with OSHA. And then he was fired. And then he was fired, along with 2 other workers who'd supported his complaint. Lucas was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I can arrange a meeting with Wu, but Emily, you need to be careful. If you're thinking about playing both sides, you could end up betraying everyone. I'm not trying to play both sides. I'm trying to figure out what the right side actually is. 2 days later, I sat across from Daniel Wu in a small conference room at Lucas's firm. He was smaller than I'd expected, with graying hair and tired eyes that seemed to take in everything. When Lucas introduced me as Emily Reyes, recognition flickered across his face. You're her daughter. Yes. And you want to help us sue your mother? I want to understand what happened. Lucas told me about the safety violations, about your termination. I'm sorry for what you went through. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. Are you here as a lawyer or as family? I don't know yet. Something in my honesty seemed to reach him. Your mother is a complicated woman, Ms. Reyes. Brilliant, driven, absolutely ruthless when she needs to be. But I don't think she set out to hurt anyone. Then what happened? Money happened. Pressure happened. She took on too much too fast, and when things got tight, she started cutting corners. First it was employee benefits, then safety equipment, then maintenance on the warehouses. But the chemical exposure? was the result of trying to maximize warehouse space by storing incompatible materials together. She knew it was dangerous. We all did. But the alternative was renting additional storage space she couldn't afford. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. So she chose to risk her workers' health instead of her profit margins. She chose to gamble that nothing would happen before she could fix it. And when something did happen, when people started getting sick, she chose to cover it up instead of taking responsibility. Cover it up? How? Daniel and Lucas exchanged glances. Lucas nodded slightly. Medical records, Daniel said. When workers started reporting symptoms, she arranged for them to be seen by a company doctor who diagnosed everything as seasonal allergies or stress. She also had the warehouse cleaned and repainted before OSHA could do their inspection. Cleaned how? Thoroughly enough to remove any evidence of chemical contamination. By the time the inspectors arrived, air quality was normal. I felt like I was falling. This wasn't just about cutting corners or poor judgment. This was deliberate obstruction of a federal investigation. Do you have proof? Daniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. Copies of internal memos, photos I took before the cleanup, medical records from workers who'd seen outside doctors on their own. Your mother is very good at covering her tracks, but she's not perfect. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The first document was a memo from my mother to her facilities manager. Clean Warehouse C thoroughly before federal inspection. Remove all chemical storage to off-site location. Ensure no trace remains of recent storage practices. The second was a photo of workers in the warehouse wearing no protective equipment while handling containers marked with chemical hazard symbols. The third was a medical report from a worker who developed chemical burns on his hands and arms. Jesus, I whispered. There's more, Daniel said quietly. This isn't the first time, Ms. Reyes. There's a pattern going back years. Safety shortcuts, worker complaints, cover-ups. Your mother has been playing Russian roulette with people's lives every time her profit margins got tight. I closed the folder, my hands trembling. Why are you showing me this?
Because Lucas says you're different from your mother. Because you care about workers' rights. And because I think you need to understand that this isn't just about money. It's about justice for people who trusted your mother to keep them safe. I thought about my sister Sophia, working in the corporate office, probably unaware of what was happening in the warehouses. I thought about my mother, desperately asking for my help while sitting on years of evidence that could send her to prison. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to choose a side, Daniel said. Not because she's your mother, not because he's just another client, but because you've seen what she's capable of, and you have to decide if you can live with helping her escape consequences for poisoning her own workers. I looked at Lucas, who was watching me with concern and something that might have been pity. I need to see the warehouse, I said finally. Emily, Lucas started. I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to understand what really happened before I make any decisions. Daniel nodded slowly. I can arrange that. But once you see it, you won't be able to pretend you don't know anymore. Good, I said, though my voice sounded steadier than I felt. I'm tired of pretending. Warehouse C sat in an industrial district 20 minutes outside the city, a sprawling concrete building that looked like every other storage facility in the area. Daniel met me in the parking lot on a gray Saturday morning, carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone returning to a crime scene. The main storage area is through here, he said, leading me through a side entrance. This is where we kept the textile dyes and cleaning solvents. The space was cavernous and eerily quiet. Concrete floors stretched endlessly under fluorescent lights, interrupted by support columns and empty metal shelving. The air smelled faintly of bleach and something else, something chemical that made my nose burn. It's been cleaned repeatedly since the incident, Daniel explained, noticing my reaction, but you can still smell it sometimes, especially when it's humid. He walked me through the layout, pointing out where different materials had been stored. Acid-based dyes here, alkaline cleaning solutions there. The ventilation system, he gestured towards ceiling vents, was designed for general storage, not chemical processing. How long were workers exposed? About 8 months. We started noticing symptoms around month 3, but management kept telling us it was normal for people to need time to adjust to warehouse work. I pulled out my phone and took photos, documenting everything I could see. Who made the decision to store incompatible chemicals together? Daniel's expression darkened. That came from the top. Your mother personally approved the new storage configuration to maximize space utilization. Did she know about the health risks? She had the safety assessment reports. I submitted 3 separate memos outlining the dangers. He pulled out his phone and showed me copies. Each time, I was told that safety concerns were being reviewed by corporate. I read the memos, my stomach sinking with each line. Daniel had been thorough, documenting everything from poor ventilation to the lack of safety equipment. He even included cost estimates for proper storage solutions that would have cost less than my mother probably spent on her monthly car payment. What happened when workers started getting sick? First, they were told it was seasonal allergies, then stress from workplace changes. When 3 people ended up in the emergency room with chemical burns, that's when I filed the OSHA complaint. And 3 days later, you were fired. 3 days later, I was called into HR and told that my position was being eliminated due to budget constraints. 15 years of employment, excellent reviews, and suddenly, I was expendable. We walked through the rest of the warehouse in silence. I tried to imagine people working here every day, breathing contaminated air, handling dangerous materials without proper protection, trusting that their employer would keep them safe. My mother had betrayed that trust for the sake of quarterly profits.
I've seen enough, I said finally. Outside, Daniel turned to me with a question I'd been dreading. So, what are you going to do? I don't know yet. Your mother's lawyers called my attorney yesterday. They want to settle. That surprised me. For how much? $2 million, split between all the affected workers with non-disclosure agreements. I did quick math. 17 workers, $2 million, less than $120,000 each before legal fees. For people who suffered permanent health damage and lost their jobs? That's insulting. That's what I told them. They said it was a generous opening offer. What do you want? Daniel looked back at the warehouse. I want her to admit what she did. I want proper medical care for everyone who got sick. I want assurance that she'll never put workers at risk like this again. And yes, I want enough money to make sure she understands there are real consequences for poisoning people. How much money? $50 million. And criminal charges if we can prove she knowingly endangered workers. I felt the weight of the choice pressing down on me. Help my mother and potentially save the family business while letting her escape real accountability? Or watch her face the full consequences of her actions, knowing that it would destroy everything she'd built and hurt my sister in the process? Can I ask you something personal? I said. Daniel nodded. Do you want to destroy her or do you want justice? He was quiet for a long moment. I want her to face the same consequences any other employer would face for doing what she did. If that destroys her, that's her choice, not mine. I called Sophia that evening and asked her to meet me for coffee. My sister arrived looking polished, as always. Designer handbag, perfect makeup, the kind of confidence that came from never having to question her place in the world. Emily, you look good. Different somehow. She hugged me, and for a moment, I felt like we were kids again, before careers and family dynamics had driven a wedge between us. Sophia, I need to ask you about something serious. Her expression shifted, wariness creeping in. This is about the lawsuit, isn't it? Mom said you might be helping with the legal defense. What do you know about what happened in Warehouse C? I know there was some kind of safety issue that got blown out of proportion by a disgruntled employee. A disgruntled employee who worked for the company for 15 years? Daniel Wu was always causing problems, Emily, always. Questioning management decisions, undermining efficiency initiatives. Efficiency initiatives that put workers at risk? Sometimes you have to make difficult choices to keep a business competitive.
I stared at my sister, seeing our mother's influence in every word. Sophia, do you know what chemicals were being stored in that warehouse? I'm not involved in warehouse operations. That's not my department. But you knew about the safety complaints? A pause. I knew there were some concerns. And you knew about the OSHA investigation? Emily, where are you going with this? I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos from Daniel's file. Workers handling chemical containers without protective equipment. She looked at the image, and I watched something shift in her expression. Where did you get this?
From Daniel Wu. He documented everything before he was fired. He wasn't supposed to be taking photos in the warehouse. He was trying to protect his coworkers. He was building a case to sue the company. Because the company was poisoning its workers. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too public for this conversation. Other customers were glancing our way, and Sophia seemed to realize we were attracting attention. "We should go somewhere private," she said quietly. We ended up in my apartment, sitting across from each other like negotiators instead of sisters. Sophia had always been good at compartmentalizing, at separating her personal feelings from business realities. It was a skill our mother had taught her well. "How much do you know?" I asked. "I know there were some storage issues in Warehouse C. I know Daniel Wu filed a complaint and was subsequently terminated for performance reasons. I know he's now leading a frivolous lawsuit against the company." Frivolous? These kinds of suits happen all the time, Emily. Disgruntled employees looking for paydays. I showed her Daniel's medical records, the internal memos, the photos documenting the contamination. With each piece of evidence, I watched my sister's composure crack a little more. "Did you know Mom had the warehouse cleaned before the OSHA inspection?" She was quiet for a long moment. I knew there was some kind of remediation. Or evidence destruction? Don't be dramatic. 3 people ended up in the emergency room with chemical burns, Sophia. How is that dramatic? She stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the street below. "You don't understand the pressures Mom was under. The company was struggling. We were over-leveraged, and there were difficult decisions that had to be made. Like risking workers' health to save money on proper storage. Like trying to keep 63 people employed instead of laying them off. By potentially killing some of them?" Sophia spun around, her professional mask finally slipping. "You think this is easy? You think Mom wanted any of this to happen? She's worked her entire life to build something meaningful, something that could provide for our family and our employees' families. Sometimes that means making choices that aren't perfect." Not perfect. Sophia, this isn't about business strategy. This is about basic human decency. Easy to say when you've never had to make a payroll or keep a company alive during a recession. I felt the familiar frustration of arguing with my family, the way they could twist any moral issue into a business necessity, any human cost into an acceptable sacrifice for the greater good of profit margins. "What would Dad think about this?" I asked quietly. Sophia's face crumpled slightly at the mention of our father. "Dad would want us to stick together as a family. Dad would want us to do the right thing." The right thing for who? For Daniel Wu? For the 17 workers who still have jobs because the company survived? For the other 46 employees who would lose their livelihoods if we go bankrupt, paying lawsuit settlements? It was a compelling argument, and I could see why Sophia had convinced herself it was true. But I also remembered our father's voice, the conversations we'd had about justice and responsibility and doing what was right even when it was difficult. "Sophia, if you could go back and change how this was handled, would you?" She was quiet for a long time. "Yes," she said finally. "But we can't go back. We can only deal with where we are now." Where we are now is facing the consequences of choices that put people's lives at risk. Where we are now is trying to find a solution that works for everyone. There is no solution that works for everyone. Someone has to pay for what happened. Sophia looked at me with something that might have been pity. You really haven't changed, have you? Still seeing the world in black and white, good guys and bad guys. Some things are black and white, not when it's your family on the line. The call from my mother came the next morning. We need to talk, all of us, tonight. I arrived at the family house at 7 p.m., driving through the neighborhood where I'd grown up. The Spanish colonials still looked imposing, though I noticed details I'd missed as a child. The perfectly manicured lawn that required constant maintenance, the imported tile work that had probably cost more than most people's cars, the security system that had always made me feel like we were under siege rather than protected. Sophia's BMW was already in the driveway. I found them in my mother's study, the room where she'd conducted business calls throughout my childhood. Vivian sat behind her mahogany desk like a CEO chairing a board meeting, while Sophia occupied one of the leather chairs across from her. A third chair waited for me. Emily, thank you for coming. My mother's tone was formal, businesslike. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about the situation facing our family. I sat down, but didn't respond. Let her make the first move. Sophia has told me about your conversation yesterday, about the materials you've seen. Materials that prove you knowingly endangered your workers? Materials that show difficult business decisions made during challenging times. She opened a file folder on her desk. I've had my attorneys review the case thoroughly. The settlement offer we made, $2 million, is more than fair compensation for any inconvenience the affected workers experienced. Inconvenience? I couldn't keep the disgust out of my voice. 3 people were hospitalized. 3 people received excellent medical care, fully covered by company insurance. After you tried to convince them they were suffering from allergies? My mother's expression hardened. Emily, I've asked you here to discuss how you can help resolve the situation, not to relitigate decisions that were made under extraordinary pressure. The pressure to maintain profit margins? The pressure to keep this company alive and our employees working? Sophia leaned forward. Emily, we need to focus on solutions. The settlement offer is generous. Daniel Wu and his attorneys are being unreasonable. $50 million is unreasonable, my mother added. It would bankrupt the company and put dozens of people out of work. Maybe the company deserves to be bankrupt. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. My mother went very still. I see, she said quietly. So you've made your choice. I haven't made any choice yet. Yes, you have. You've chosen to side with people who want to destroy everything our family has built, people who would rather see 63 workers unemployed than accept reasonable compensation for their claims. I've chosen to side with the truth. The truth? My mother stood up, her composure finally cracking. The truth is that I made hard decisions to keep this company afloat during the worst recession in decades. The truth is that I saved jobs and preserved livelihoods while other companies were closing warehouses and laying off entire workforces. The truth is that you put people's lives at risk to save money. I took calculated risks to preserve employment for dozens of families. Calculated risks with other people's health. Sophia stepped between us. Stop it, both of you. This isn't helping anyone. My mother sat back down, visibly struggling to regain control. Emily, I'm offering you one last chance to help your family. Join the legal team. Help us find a reasonable settlement that compensates the workers without destroying the company. And if I refuse, then you're choosing to help destroy everything your father and I built together. I thought about my father, about the conversations we'd had about right and wrong, about the way he'd encouraged me to follow my conscience, even when it was difficult, about how disappointed he would be to see what his company had become under my mother's leadership. Dad wouldn't want the company to survive if it meant poisoning people to keep it profitable. Your father never had to make the kinds of decisions I've had to make. Because he wouldn't have put workers at risk in the first place. My mother's face went cold. Your father was a dreamer, Emily. I'm the one who built this into something real. You built it into something that hurts people. I built it into something that matters. To who? To the workers in the hospital? To Daniel Wu's family after you destroyed his career? My mother stood up again, this time walking to the window that overlooked her garden. I need an answer, Emily. Will you help us or not? I looked at Sophia, who was watching me with a mixture of hope and fear. I thought about the warehouse, about Daniel Wu's documentation, about the choice between family loyalty and moral clarity. I'll help, I said finally. Relief flooded both their faces, but not the way you want. The relief vanished. I'm going to make sure Daniel Wu gets the justice he deserves. I'm going to make sure the truth comes out about what you did to those workers, and I'm going to make sure you face real consequences for putting profit over people's lives. My mother turned back to face me, her expression unreadable. Then you're no longer welcome in this house. Good, I said, standing up. I never felt welcome here anyway. I walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Sophia. It's not too late for you to choose differently. My sister looked between me and our mother, her face torn with conflict, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. My choice is my family. Then you chose wrong, I said, and walked out of the house where I'd grown up, knowing I would never return. The war room at Lucas's firm buzzed with controlled chaos as we prepared for trial. I'd officially joined the legal team representing the workers, and there was no going back. Emily, look at this, Lucas called, holding up financial records. Your mother's been creative with her accounting. The documents revealed a company hemorrhaging money while maintaining appearances, executive bonuses, and luxury renovations while cutting corners on worker safety. My mother had filed insurance claims for general workplace injuries instead of chemical exposure, leaving workers to pay their own medical bills. She was spending on image while poisoning her employees, I said quietly. I interviewed warehouse workers throughout the week. Maria Santos, quality control for 12 years, described the chemical smell that made eyes water and throats burn. Management promised safety equipment that never came. Tommy Nguyen, 19 years old, collapsed gasping for air before paramedics rushed him to the hospital. 8 months of breathing poison while your mother's people told us we were imagining things, Maria said, her voice steady but angry. Each testimony painted the same picture, systematic endangerment followed by deliberate cover-up. This wasn't negligence, it was criminal conspiracy. Then my mother struck back. A motion to disqualify me arrived, claiming conflict of interest and violation of family attorney-client privilege. The local newspaper ran a devastating article questioning my motives, suggesting I joined the lawsuit out of spite rather than principle. The defense is arguing the entire case is tainted, Sarah Chen, our senior partner, explained. They're claiming your involvement means all evidence could have been obtained through privileged communications. I made the hardest decision of my legal career. I'll withdraw voluntarily. Keep the focus where it belongs, on the workers. But my mother wasn't finished. An eviction notice appeared on my apartment door, citing suspicious business activities. My landlord claimed complaints about unusual activity and legal meetings at all hours. She was systematically dismantling my life. The call came from Daniel Wu 2 weeks later. Emily, you need to see something. Meet me at Warehouse C. At the industrial complex, Daniel introduced me to Rick Morrison, the site manager for 8 years. Rick looked nervous, glancing around as if expecting security. I can't sleep at night anymore, Rick said, because I keep thinking about what could have happened if one of those kids had been hurt worse. Kids?
My stomach dropped. Summer Youth Employment Program. High school students ages 16 to 18. 6 of them worked in Warehouse C during the worst exposure period. The horror deepened. Teenagers from low-income families earning money for college had been poisoned alongside the adult workers. All 6 got sick. Respiratory problems, skin irritation, one hospitalized with chemical burns. What did the company tell their parents? Same lies. Seasonal allergies, normal adjustment to warehouse work. Rick showed me documentation that made my blood run cold. The summer program operated through a subsidiary, Reyes Educational Opportunities, with separate liability. When OSHA investigated, they only examined regular employees. The teenagers weren't included in their scope. Internal emails revealed my mother knew about the kids' symptoms and instructed coordinators not to report them to parents. One memo was particularly damning. Summer worker health concerns should be handled through coordinators to minimize parent alarm and potential liability exposure. 2 teenagers developed long-term respiratory problems. Their parents paid thousands in medical bills for asthma treatments, unaware the condition was caused by workplace chemical exposure. "I've got a 17-year-old daughter," Rick explained. "I keep thinking about what I'd want someone to do if she was getting poisoned at work, and nobody told me." That evening, I called Assistant District Attorney Patricia Hernandez. In her office the next morning, I laid out everything: documentation of teenage workers in the contaminated warehouse, evidence of systematic concealment, medical records showing long-term health impacts that families didn't know were work-related. "This is serious," Patricia said after reviewing the documents. "Endangering minors, conspiracy to conceal evidence, medical fraud. We're looking at multiple felony charges." What happens next? We expand our investigation, interview affected families, examine the corporate structure. She paused. "Miss Reyes, your mother could face significant prison time if convicted." "I understand. Given the ongoing retaliation you've described, we may need protective measures. If she's willing to target your housing and employment, she might escalate further." The idea of needing protection from my own mother was surreal but not paranoid. Vivian Reyes had already shown what she was capable of. That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Emily?" My mother's voice was ice. "We need to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea." "It's about Sophia." My stomach dropped. "What about Sophia?" "Meet me at Morton's at 6 p.m. Come alone."
At the restaurant, my mother looked different, older, more fragile, though her posture still conveyed authority. "What's this about, Sophia?" I demanded. "Straight to business. Good." She opened a folder. "Sophia has been cooperating with federal investigators." I stared at her. "What?" "For 6 months, ever since the warehouse incident. She's been providing information about company operations, financial irregularities, decision-making processes." My mother's voice was perfectly controlled. "She's the one who gave them access to internal communications about the summer program." The betrayal was breathtaking. Not just that Sophia had been secretly cooperating, but that my mother was revealing it now in this way. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the federal investigation is about to become public. Because Sophia is going to testify against me. And because I want you to understand that your little sister played you perfectly." "Played me how?" "Did you really think those documents just fell into your lap? That Rick Morrison suddenly developed a conscience? Sophia orchestrated everything. Your recruitment to the workers' legal team, the evidence you found, even the media campaign that forced you to withdraw." I felt reality shifting around me. "That's impossible." "Is it? Who knew about your meetings with Lucas? Who had access to family legal discussions? Who understood exactly how to manipulate your sense of justice?" My mother pulled out her phone and played a recording. Sophia's voice, clear and recognizable. "Emily's involvement will give the workers' case credibility while making Mom look like she's being betrayed by her own family. The media will eat it up." "Sophia has been building a case against me for months," my mother continued. "She needed someone with legal expertise to validate the evidence, someone whose moral outrage would be authentic because they didn't know they were being manipulated."
The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Sophia had used my principles against me, weaponized my desire for justice to build a case that would destroy our mother while positioning herself as the conscience-stricken whistleblower. "Why?" I whispered. "Because Sophia wants the company, because she's tired of waiting for me to step aside, because destroying me publicly allows her to rebuild the business without my reputation hanging over it." I thought about every conversation with Sophia, every moment of seeming family loyalty, every guilt trip about solidarity. It had all been theater. The teenagers getting sick, that was real. Yes, but Sophia's the one who made sure you found out about it at exactly the right moment to maximum impact. My mother leaned forward. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Emily. I'm not claiming I didn't make terrible decisions. But I need you to understand that you've been a pawn in your sister's game from the beginning." "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. It's too late for that. Sophia's testimony will destroy me whether you're involved or not." She stood to leave. "I just wanted you to know that the daughter you thought was the good one has been playing a longer game than either of us realized." As she walked away, I sat alone at the table where my family had officially collapsed, wondering if anything I'd believed about justice, family, or my own motivations had ever been real. 6 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse watching my mother's sentencing hearing. The woman who had once commanded boardrooms and intimidated competitors looked diminished in her defendant's chair, wearing a simple navy suit instead of her usual designer armor. Judge Harold Benton reviewed the charges methodically: criminal conspiracy, reckless endangerment, obstruction of justice, and the most damning, endangerment of minors in the workplace. The evidence had been overwhelming, built on Sophia's 6 months of cooperation and my unwitting contribution of the summer program documentation. "Mrs. Reyes," Judge Benton addressed my mother, "your actions endangered the health and safety of your employees, including minor children, and then you orchestrated a systematic cover-up to avoid accountability. The court finds these actions particularly egregious given your position of trust as an employer." I watched my mother's face remain impassive as the judge continued. She'd maintained her composure throughout the trial, never breaking, never showing remorse. Even now, facing the consequences of her choices, she projected the same steely determination that had built her business empire. The court sentences you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. Additionally, you are permanently barred from serving in any executive capacity in a corporation and must pay restitution totaling $2.3 million to affected workers and their families. 4 years. It felt simultaneously like justice and devastation. My mother would be 60 when she was released, her business empire destroyed, her reputation in ruins. The company that 3 generations of our family had built would be dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay settlements and restitution. Sophia sat 3 rows behind me, flanked by her legal team. She'd testified for 2 days during the trial, presenting herself as the conscience-stricken daughter who couldn't stand by while her mother poisoned workers. The jury had found her compelling, the dutiful daughter who'd risked everything to do the right thing. The media had embraced the narrative Sophia carefully constructed. "Executive's daughter risks everything to expose corporate crimes," read the headlines. She'd given interviews about the difficult decision to turn against her mother, about the moral courage required to choose justice over family loyalty. I was the footnote in that story, the other daughter who'd briefly gotten involved before being sidelined by conflicts of interest. Sophia had orchestrated it perfectly, using my genuine outrage and legal expertise to build her case while ensuring I wouldn't be around to share credit for bringing down Vivian Reyes. After the sentencing, I walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon sun. Washington, D.C. buzzed with its usual energy. People hurrying between meetings and hearings, the machinery of justice and politics grinding forward regardless of individual tragedies. "Emily." I turned to find Daniel Wu approaching, wearing a well-tailored suit that suggested the settlement money had been put to good use. He looked healthier than when I'd first met him, the stress lines around his eyes softened by the vindication of victory. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I'm not sure. How are you supposed to feel when your mother goes to prison? Probably exactly how you feel right now. Conflicted, sad, and maybe a little relieved that it's finally over. We walked in silence for a few blocks, leaving behind the courthouse and the media circus that had surrounded the trial. Daniel had become something of a folk hero in labor rights circles, the whistleblower who'd taken down a corrupt corporation despite personal cost. The restitution will help, I said finally. It will. Miguel Santos can finally get proper treatment for his asthma. Maria's medical bills are covered. The other workers who got sick can afford the ongoing care they need. He paused. Your testimony about the summer program made a big difference in the settlement amount. I'd been called as a witness despite no longer being involved in the case. My testimony about discovering the documentation of teenage workers had been crucial in establishing the most serious charges. It felt strange to be helping prosecute my own mother. But the faces of those kids, Miguel Santos struggling to breathe, the others suffering long-term health problems, had made the choice clear. Daniel, can I ask you something? Do you think I did the right thing? He stopped walking and looked at me directly. Emily, I've worked for a lot of employers in my career. Most of them were decent people trying to do right by their workers. Your mother wasn't one of them. She made choices that put people's lives at risk, and when those choices had consequences, she tried to cover them up rather than take responsibility. But she's still my mother. Yes, she is. And that makes what you did harder, not easier. Anyone can stand up to a stranger who's doing wrong. It takes real courage to stand up to family. Even when it turns out I was being manipulated by my sister? Daniel's expression grew thoughtful. Sophia used you, that's true. But Emily, the evidence you provided was real. The harm to those workers was real. The cover-up was real. Just because Sophia had ulterior motives doesn't mean the justice that resulted was wrong. We reached the metro station where our paths would diverge. Daniel was heading home to his family, to the life he'd rebuilt after losing his job for doing the right thing. I was heading back to my hotel room, still displaced 6 months after my eviction, still unemployed, despite the vindication of the trial. What are you going to do now?
I honestly don't know. Legal aid won't take me back. Too much baggage from the trial. Private firms see me as a liability. I'm thinking about leaving D.C., starting over somewhere else. For what it's worth, there are people in this city who know what you sacrificed to make sure the truth came out. That counts for something. After Daniel left, I sat on a bench outside the metro station, watching commuters hurry past. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. Saw the news. How are you doing? I'd been avoiding Lucas since the revelation about Sophia's manipulation. Our friendship had become another casualty of my family's dysfunction, complicated by questions about what I'd known and when I'd known it. I'm okay, I texted back. Just processing everything. Want to grab dinner? I have something to tell you. We met at a small restaurant in Adams Morgan, far from the downtown legal scene where our presence together might be noted and analyzed. Lucas looked older than his 30 years, the stress of the high-profile case having taken its toll. How bad was it? He asked after we'd ordered. 4 years, permanent ban from corporate leadership, $2.3 million in restitution. He nodded grimly. That's serious time. But given what she did... I know. It's just strange watching your mother become a convicted felon on national television. Emily, there's something you need to know about Sophia. I looked up from my untouched salad. What now? She's been approached by several companies about executive positions. Apparently, her moral courage in exposing corporate wrongdoing has made her very attractive to boards looking for ethical leadership. The irony was breathtaking. Sophia had destroyed my mother and manipulated me, and she was being rewarded with the kind of high-level corporate positions she'd always wanted. She's gonna be fine, I said bitterly. More than fine. There's talk of her starting a consulting firm focused on corporate ethics and compliance. She's positioning herself as an expert on preventing the kind of problems that brought down your mother's company. Problems she helped create. Problems she exposed. At least, that's how the market sees it. We ate in silence for a while, both lost in thoughts about justice and its complications. Finally, Lucas spoke again. Emily, I've been thinking about what comes next for you. I've been thinking about that too. Probably time to leave DC, start fresh somewhere else. Actually, I have a different idea. What if you didn't leave? What do you mean? What if you started your own practice? Workers' rights, employment law, the kind of advocacy work you've always cared about. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what money? What client base? Who's going to trust a lawyer whose own family destroyed her career? The same people who watched you sacrifice everything to make sure workers got justice. The same people who saw you choose principle over family loyalty. Lucas leaned forward, his expression earnest. Emily, there are dozens of workers from other companies who've reached out since the trial. People who've seen safety violations, wage theft, retaliation for reporting problems. They want representation from someone they know will put their interests first. Even if it means going up against powerful employers. Especially if it means going up against powerful employers. You've proven you're willing to do that. The idea was both terrifying and appealing. Starting my own practice would mean financial uncertainty, long hours, and the constant stress of building a client base from nothing. But it would also mean freedom to take the cases I believed in, to represent people who needed advocates rather than those who could pay the highest fees. I'd need office space, startup capital, malpractice insurance.
I know a few lawyers who'd be willing to help with the startup costs. Consider it an investment in justice. Over the next hour, Lucas outlined a plan that was ambitious and risky, but surprisingly practical. A small firm focused on workers' rights, funded by settlement fees from successful cases, building a reputation for taking on employers who thought they were too powerful to face consequences. "There's one more thing," Lucas said as we prepared to leave. "Aunt Rosa called my office yesterday. She wanted to know how to reach you." I hadn't spoken to my aunt since before the trial. The family relationships that had survived my mother's downfall were complicated and fragile. What did she want? She didn't say, but Emily, maybe it's time to find out which family relationships are worth rebuilding. The next morning, I called Aunt Rosa. Her voice was warm but cautious when she answered. "Mija, I've been worried about you. How are you doing?" "I'm surviving. How are you doing with everything that's happened?" "Heartbroken about Vivian, proud of you, confused about Sophia." She paused. "Can we talk? In person?" We met at her house in Arlington, the same place where I'd sought refuge during difficult moments of my childhood. Rosa had aged in the months since the trial, the stress of watching her family tear itself apart evident in the new lines around her eyes. "I need to tell you something about your mother," she said after we'd settled in her living room with coffee. "Rosa, I think I know everything I need to know about my mother. Not everything. Not about why she became the person she became." Over the next hour, Rosa told me stories I'd never heard. About my mother's childhood in Guatemala, where her father had been murdered by soldiers for organizing workers at a textile factory. About fleeing to the United States with nothing, watching her mother work 3 jobs to keep the family alive. About the trauma that had shaped Vivian's desperate need for financial security. She was terrified of being poor again, terrified of being powerless. So she built walls around herself made of money and success, and she taught herself to see anything that threatened those walls as an enemy. "That doesn't excuse what she did to those workers," I said. "No, it doesn't, but it explains it. Your mother confused survival with success, confused protecting herself with protecting her family." Rosa reached across the table and took my hand. "Emily,
Your mother made terrible choices, but the daughter who risked everything to make sure those workers got justice, that's her legacy too. The courage you showed, the principles you refused to compromise, you learned those from her too. I learned them from Dad. You learned them from both of them. Your father's gentleness and your mother's strength. That's what made you willing to stand up to her when she lost her way. As I drove back to my hotel that evening, I thought about legacy and redemption, about the difference between explanation and excuse. My mother's trauma didn't justify endangering workers, but understanding it helped me understand the fear that had driven her choices. More importantly, it helped me understand what I wanted my own legacy to be. The next week, I signed a lease on a small office in a converted warehouse in Northeast D.C. The space was nothing fancy. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, windows that needed cleaning. But it was mine. The sign on the door read, Emily Reyes, Attorney at Law, Workers' Rights and Employment Justice. My first client was Maria Santos, the quality control worker from Warehouse C. She'd heard about another company with safety violations and wanted representation for a friend who was afraid to report them. I know you'll do right by her, Maria said as she referred the case. I know you understand what it means to choose justice over family. As I prepared for this new case, I realized that Sophia had been wrong about one thing. She'd assumed that destroying our mother would clear the field for her own ambitions, that justice was a zero-sum game where someone had to lose for someone else to win.
But real justice wasn't about winners and losers. It was about accountability, truth, and the courage to stand up for what was right even when the cost was personal. My mother was in prison, paying the price for choices that had endangered innocent people. Sophia was building a career on the foundation of our family's destruction. I was starting over with nothing but a law degree and a commitment to representing people who needed advocates. For the first time in months, I felt like I knew exactly where I belonged. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.